Good morning. We're delighted to have you all here with us today. My name is Becky Massott-Whitlow. I'm the Director of Institutional Assessment and Research at Winston-Salem State University. I've worked in higher education for right at 20 years, and I have a background in educational research, measurement, and evaluation with a concentration in mathematical statistics. I have my colleague here with me.
Hi, I'm Jenny Minch. I've been at Winston-Salem State for just about 4 years. I was in the community college system for a couple years prior to that, been using Tableau for about 6 years.
And I will say that Jenny was extremely instrumental in coming to our university and actually brought Tableau to us. That was one of her first questions in her interview was, are we going to be able to get Tableau? We got it, and we've been running with it ever since. So we hope to share with you some information today that will be helpful as you go back to your various roles. We did want to get a sense of who's in the room. So who do we have in the room? Higher education? Raise of hands?
Wow.
Okay, wow. What are the various roles? Any institutional research areas? Okay. Student affairs? Okay. Faculty? Okay. Nice.
IT? Yeah.
Wonderful. And how many of you have been using Tableau? Excellent. Excellent. Great, great. Well, as we get started, want to just initially provide you with a brief overview of our university. Want to talk some about our office, talk about dashboard evolution, and then provide for you some Tableau demonstrations. As you leave this session, we hope that you are able to identify some better ways to share data and information. My background is also coming from assessment, and so that's why you do see these learning outcomes. We're hoping that you will be able to recognize some better data visualization practices, and we want to make sure that you can just describe the value of using the dashboards for decision making. One of the biggest challenges that I have in my area is we have such a great variety of information and data, and the question is, what do we do with it? And so I am constantly trying to make sure that we are providing the information in a way that's useful to others, and that's where Tableau has really come in and helped us. Just to give you a brief idea, we are from Winston-Salem State University. We are an HBCU. We are a 4-year public university with about 5,000 or so students, and our largest major is nursing. This is our office. And so you have already met Jenny, one of our research associates. We have another research associate. We have an administrative assistant, a programmer, analyst. We have an assessment coordinator who's actually somewhere in the room with you all today. Laura Chris, she's here with us. And then we also have a statistical analyst on our staff. As many of you know, institutional assessment and research offices have a variety of functions. So just wanted to give you an idea of some of the functions that our office is responsible for. So in addition to doing data analytics, we do the routine IPEDS reporting. We actually help with retention analyses. We do enrollment projections. We actually do salary equity studies, do a variety of enrollment and research and planning. Also, many of you who are in higher education probably recognize that the role of institutional research has really changed greatly over the years. And we've actually gone away from just simply reporting data to actually being held more responsible for providing data analyses and actually interpreting the data for folks. And so this is a quote that I wanted to share with all of you that just emphasizes the changing role of institutional research. This same author, Vulcan, oftentimes talks of institutional research as the guiding light. This is an adaptation from this illustration, and it just shows the variety of roles that institutional research offices often have. Regardless of if your office, if it's not an institutional research area, regardless of your role, we hope and trust that you will find that Tableau can actually provide you with a useful solution to help and visualize your data and get information into the hands of folks so that they can actually make some decisions and act on it. What we've really found since Jenny's come on board, oftentimes I'll go into a meeting, I'll come back afterwards, we have a question, and I'm asking Jenny, how quickly can we get this information? It's like, okay, by the close of business, we've got something that we can roll out, push out to folks, and we understand what's happening. Recently, our area, we are in North Carolina, we had Hurricane Florence come through. And the question was, how many of our students were impacted? And we were working with our system office to try to deploy resources and get things. Jenny was very helpful in terms of being able to do a visualization and helping to see where these students were, what their majors were, where they were in the pipeline. And so those are just very real applications of how we can quickly pull in the tool and actually create some solutions and share information very quickly. As Jenny came on board and we were talking about Tableau and bringing it to our campus, I'll be honest, higher education, things are pretty slow to change. You probably know that. And so we wanted to think big but really start small. So we recognized that we couldn't do everything at once, so we took a phased-in approach, and that's really worked well for our institution. It was very important that not only did we know our data, but that we knew our audience, and we knew what would be too much for them. And so we rolled out things very slowly and very intentionally. Jenny didn't make it too hard to be creative and have fun with the process. So as we were getting questions and that in meetings as to what they wanted to see, we really did try to take their input and make whatever they wanted to do, but make it better. And so we're going to share with you some examples of what we've done and where we're going. We've always showcased the products, and as I said, we valued the feedback. One of the things, you know, research, evaluation, program evaluation, all of these things, they're iterative processes, and so you get better over time. And so don't expect to roll out and things be just your perfect product. We very much valued the feedback and have always showcased the dashboard. So we'll bring folks together, oftentimes a smaller group of folks, and ask them, what do you like about this? What do you not like? How can we change it? And then Jenny always makes the change, usually the same day. You do. Mainly with the dashboards, and our colleagues in the office have made this very easy for us because they're the first ones that we showcase our products to. And Laura Crest, who's in the room, has always helped us to make sure that the products that we're doing or that the dashboards make sense. So we have a lot of pushback. We try to make sure we keep it simple, and we train. So we bring folks in, and we've done a lot of work. We have a new provost at our institution, and he has changed. Traditionally, oftentimes at higher education institutions, you have retreats prior to the beginning of the academic year. We no longer have retreats. We have advancement sessions because we do not retreat at Winston-Salem State University. We advance. So what we did, though, is we took it as an opportunity to train our faculty and staff. And what we did, Jenny's going to actually showcase with you later on our digital escape room. And one of the things that we recognize is as we deploy these dashboards, we needed to make sure that we trained folks to be able to use them and to know what they were looking at. So that's been very important. Going to run through briefly reports before and after. Those of you in higher education, again, fact books. You've probably know what I'm talking about. If you work at a university, you know we have all of these fact books. This is a page from our old fact book. You can find them still on our website in PDF form. It's showing you information about applicants, acceptances, and enrollees. A lot of information that's being shared here, not particularly intriguing, maybe a little difficult to read. This was one of our first projects. You're going to see the dashboard. It doesn't look too terribly different, and again, that was very intentional because we found that even with this, folks were like, whoa, this is very different. You know, you went from line graphs to show things, and now you have bar charts that have the heights and widths to show the size. This is a lot. But they really liked the filters and how they could jump between terms and they could look at specific student types and kind of narrow down that information. They quickly realized that, okay, this is a way that I won't be so overloaded with information. Again, another example. This is our before course evaluations. Everyone at a higher ed institution, you have classroom rating of instructions course evaluations. In the past, our reports look something such as this. It has the information there, but not too particularly easy to read. Again, the new and improved through Tableau. Not drastically different than the other, but does help by using color, by using the blue dots. If you hover over them, you would actually get to see what the average score is for each of these items. So we have been able to make improvements, and it's been a lot simpler for department chairs to go in and look at some of this information. Also, comparing information across courses, instructors, areas of the college, by using the filters, that's made it very easy and much more user-friendly. Another aspect of higher education, student learning outcomes, kind of these general education outcomes that we all have, things that students should know, think, or be able to do at the end of their program. So at our university, we actually have 7. And this is showing you results from one of them, which is critical thinking. We use a rubric. There are 4 different components of the rubric showing you the percent of students that are scoring at each of the benchmarks. Again, gets the information across, but not in a very pretty way and not particularly useful for many. Here is a new and improved, and this is one of the best dashboards that initially started getting folks really excited and on board. This is the same information presented in a slightly different format. It allows them, they can go look at each of the 7 student learning outcomes, see how the students are doing, has a nice little heat map. Also, with this, we were able to very quickly compare from semester to semester. One of the things at our university, you have the QEP if you're in a SACS region, which many of you may be. That was our topic, and so written communication, it was helpful for us to kind of see how things have changed over time. The other aspect is that we were looking at how students performed in the 1,000 level, which tend to be our freshman courses, versus those higher level courses, the 4,000. With this illustration, we were very easily able to convey the concerns of committee members that maybe folks don't really know how to apply these rubrics, because we found that our freshmen were scoring much the same as our seniors. And that's kind of scary. So that allowed us to kind of step back. Again, being able to dig into the data has been very, very helpful and useful for us. And so we have really taken and run with these dashboards, but what I've showed you is just the tip of the iceberg. Jenny is going to take over at this point, and she's going to share with you some of the other examples of how we've used dashboards to address issues, concerns, and questions at our institution. So Jenny?
Thank you. I'm really lucky when I came to Winston-Salem State 4 years ago that Becky was so willing to, trust me when I said we need Tableau. Tableau is going to do great things for our office and our university. And if she hadn't been willing to take that leap, we would not be where we are today at our university with this. So I'm just going to run through a few different examples with you from various areas on campus that have needed and asked for dashboards from our area and give you some examples of how we've used that. So the first example is actually from our enrollment management office. Every year we send recruiters out to high schools and to community colleges to recruit our next class of students at WSSU. But they have very limited time and very limited money. So they asked us to build a dashboard that would show them very quickly and easily where they're going to get the most bang for their buck. And so we created the yield rate dashboard. So at first we only had this table at the bottom with the color-coded number of applied, accepted, and enrolled students. And then we actually added the map on later so that they could see really quickly across the US where they could focus their efforts. So let's say you were a recruiter and you were taking a look at this dashboard. You might say, wow, we have a lot of applicants from Florida, but only a 3% yield rate. So maybe I don't want to focus my efforts there. Maybe I'd rather focus on a state like Virginia. They have about the same number of applicants, but a much higher yield rate. So we also added in several filters for intended major, student type, and academic year. And this was to let them drill down and see the population they were most interested in recruiting. For instance, our system office strategic plan right now is very focused on transfer students. We want to recruit, retain, and graduate more transfer students. And this way they could look and see exactly where our transfer students are coming from, and then they could go and recruit in those areas. One thing we learned when building this dashboard is how important it was to include definitions so that everybody is on the same page. So when I say yield rate, I'm talking about the number of accepted students who then enroll, but not everybody may know that. So we put that definition in the caption just under the table so that anytime somebody's using this dashboard, they are sure we're all on the same page. We also included a color legend so it's clear which states are actually showing a high yield rate and which states are showing a lower yield rate. So our next example comes from our alumni office. We actually had a new alumni engagement director start, and one of his first projects that he came to me with was he wanted to make an infographic. He wanted this on their website, he wanted to send it out in the alumni newsletter, and he wanted it to be easy to update every year after graduation so that they could keep showing new information about the students. So this is what I built for him. Now, we used Tableau to size this in such a way that it could be easily printed off into a PDF and then easily shared out in the newsletter or on their website as he wished. Originally, he wanted the same kind of polygon map we saw in the previous example, but I was able to convince him that a hex map would actually be a much better visualization in this case because you couldn't see the numbers in all of the states. And this way, all the states are more evenly distributed, evenly sized, and we can clearly see the information getting across. So we know exactly how many alumni live in each state. And we were still able to highlight North Carolina because that's where most of our alumni live. And we were also able to include foreign countries without having to show an entire world map. One of the unforeseen benefits of this was we were able to identify areas where there were a lot of alumni living, but not any chapters. So they've actually taken some steps to create chapters in these areas to get their alumni more involved, to keep them better in touch, and to make sure that they're still showing pride in their alma mater. So we also have our top 15 cities in the state of North Carolina and in the US. And what we realized when building this part of the dashboard, so we had a lot of dirty data. I mean, there were 6 misspellings for Winston-Salem alone. So in a perfect world, we would go in and we would fix that data before we actually built out this dashboard. However, We had over 26,000 rows of data to check, and only one person doing it, and a very tight deadline, so that didn't happen. Instead, I used the grouping function in Tableau to put all the misspelled cities together and put them under the correctly spelled alias. In the future, hopefully, we can create a Vera job to run that through and use fuzzy matching to kind of group all those together so we don't have to do it manually. So, moving on to our next example. This is actually a survey data example. Now, we send out annual surveys in the spring every year. We have senior survey, sophomore survey, a graduate student survey, faculty survey, a staff survey. Well, when it comes time for units to enter their assessment data, they have to go through pages and pages of PDFs. I'm talking 30 plus pages. And they're just looking for one number so that they can put that one number in their assessment report. Well, we were concerned that the tedium of having to go through all those reports was causing them not to put their data in, and that they were probably missing out on other questions that would be of use to them. So we decided to build a longitudinal survey dashboard. This was no small project. So we started one summer. Laura and I sat down in the conference room every day, going through every survey, listing every question, coding it by hand to every department, unit, and even initiative on campus that might be the slightest bit interested in having that data. And then we built this job in Vera. So we use this to append and merge the data from the surveys each semester to the master list. And we have to update that master list every year because inevitably we add new questions. So once we run this through Vera, it actually has an output that we can add to our Tableau union and refresh, and then we have another year's worth of data. So at this point, we're actually going to take you into our website and show you the live version that is on our Tableau public page. So when you first click on, the introductory page just has some high-level information about all 5 of the surveys. It tells you who takes the survey and when, how often, and how it's distributed. So just, housekeeping. The second page is where the magic happens. So you remember when you were that assessment person and you were hunting and pecking through 30 or more pages of survey data to find that one number? Now you have to click through 2 filters, and then you'll have your number. So let's look at an example. Let's say you work in the library. And you want to know what students think about your hours of operation. So 2 clicks and the page will pull up, maybe. And there you have it, 3 years worth of data right there. And this will eventually be built out to show 5 total years in keeping with our strategic plan. So what are you seeing here? So in 2016, the seniors were only 65% satisfied with the hours of operation for our library. And what they did was they reallocated some resources, hired a couple new staff members, and then they changed their hours to be open 24 hours a day during the school week. And now in 2018, 81% of seniors are satisfied with hours of operation. So they actually were able to use this to make some very big changes. So the next page is for those diehards who have to have the same PDF report that they've always had because they can't let go of it. But it's still improved a little. So before you had to go to a separate PDF for every semester and open a separate file. And now you can actually use this filter to toggle between all the surveys, and you can still see 3 years worth of data in the same screen. It's just built out in a much more linear fashion the way that they were used to seeing. We also have a response table up here so you can see the number of responses for every survey for every year. Now the next page is quite possibly the most useful one on the whole dashboard, and this came about because of some focus groups that we held before we launched this publicly. So we invited members from our enrollment management office and our university college to come and play with the dashboard before it was launched. They got to go through it, get their hands dirty, and then we asked them, what's good? What is it lacking? What do you still need? And they said, we need a page where we can see all of the questions that you've identified for our area, and we want to be able to download that and have it to attach to a report or put as a supporting evidence in our assessment plan. So we built this page for them, the questions by area of interest page. Now they can see all their questions together, still 3 years worth of data, and then they can download it in a PDF. The last page is really just a reference page that tells you which questions were asked on which survey for which year. Now, this is still a work in progress. There are a lot of things I would like to improve on it in the future when we do our next 5-year iteration. For instance, I would really like to make a matrix of similar questions asked across surveys. Like we ask similar questions of our sophomores and our seniors, and I want to identify those so that they can appear together in the final report. I also plan to keep the demographics static so they can be used as filters in the next version of the report. And no matter what you do, don't change survey software 1 year into the program because that was the biggest pain. So now we're actually going to go back. Whoops. We're going to go back to the presentation and look at our next example. So this is a more faculty-focused example. Every year, students change their major. It happens. Maybe you didn't get accepted into the nursing program. Maybe you decided you'd rather major in art than computer science, but for whatever reason, we need a way to track our majors. We want to know if they're changing majors and when. So we built out a major migration dashboard for our department chairs. So what are we looking at here? It's pretty simple. At the top, you have several parameters. One allows you to select the major you want to look at. Then you select the first and last semester that you want to examine. So in this example, we're looking at our students from fall 2016, and we want to know where they are by fall 2017. There's also a parameter that lets you assign a cohort, so you can look at first-time freshmen only. You can look at transfer students only. But in this particular example, we're looking at all enrolled students. And then last, you can use a filter to look at just graduate and just undergraduate students. So once you have selected your parameters, the dashboard will populate and tell you along the right-hand side some high-level metrics, just those really important numbers that you want to get at right away. So what this is telling us is that in fall of 2016, we had 77 accounting majors. By fall 2017, 23 of those had graduated, and 24 of them were retained in the major. So what happened to the other 30? Well, we can see in the tree map that they switched to business, exercise science, finance, psychology. This could be really helpful for a department chair who wants to recruit students, who wants to improve their retention, and maybe even one who wants to work with some of these other areas on campus to create interdisciplinary courses or majors. So we know intuitively that the remaining 26 who are not showing up anywhere on this are the ones that dropped out in the year that had passed. So we can also use this information. I know you can't see it in the static version, but if we were in the live version, you could hover over the boxes in the tree map, and that will actually tell you at what point you're losing that student, so you can see if they changed majors as a freshman, sophomore, junior, or senior. And then you know if they change when they're a senior, we're really having an issue. So one thing that you can't tell, because this is very simple on the front end, is that it's actually very complex on the back end. There are 53 string calculations that go into this particular dashboard, and every time we add a new semester, we add 10 more. So I don't feel like it's really sustainable in its current state. I feel like in the future, we're gonna have to look at ways to organize the data better on the back end, but for now, it really is kind of working for us and giving us some very needed information. Our next example actually came about because of a request from our provost. She wanted to know what courses are our students taking together and how successful are they in those combinations. Because we know that students, especially freshmen, are less likely to be retained if they withdraw or fail more than one course. And we wanted to know, especially when we were doing our curriculum redesign, are there certain courses that are co-requisites that maybe are not very successful combinations? Do we need to look at that? Do we need to change that? And so we built a co-course success dashboard. And this is the fun part, because this is when we're going to go in Tableau and look at how to build this, in case you would like to build one for your own institution. All right, so when this request first came down the pipeline, I knew what I wanted to build. I wanted that pretty checkerboard, with the courses on each end, and I wanted to know how successful the students were in the middle. But I did not know how to set up the data on the back end to get that. So I'm going to show you what I did wrong so that you don't do it, and then I'm going to show you the right way. So let's take a look at our data source real quick, just to familiarize ourselves. We have one grade file and one semester's worth of grades. Don't worry, this is anonymized. We're not looking at real data here. So there is one row per student per course, and they have their grade for that course. So now going back to the dashboard, I started out by duplicating the subject field because I wanted to use that to build some parameters. And so the parameters I built using those are simply a list of all the different subjects that we offer. So you select one subject to show on rows and one subject to show on columns. Now, in order to do that, I had to build a calculation that tells Tableau this parameter needs to be matched to this subject so that they're showing in the correct area. So I also duplicated the course title field so that we can look at it broken down by individual course. So let's go ahead and drag the course title up on rows, and then the copy up onto columns. And this is what I got, and this is not what I wanted. And then I thought, well, maybe it's just because I have the same subject over here. Let's change it up, and this is what I got. And that's really not what I wanted, but that's when I realized I can't just duplicate the fields. I have to duplicate the entire data source. So let's take a look at the right way to do this.
And as you noticed from Jenny, she does not give up. If I come to her and say, hey, can we do this? Is there a way to do it? Yeah, let me think about it. And I'll go in, check on it, and say, how's it coming? Well, I'm not quite there yet, but I've got it. And she does get it. It's really fun to watch her.
So I duplicated the data source here, and I connected it to itself on an inner join on ID. So for my own sanity, I went ahead and renamed one of them rows and one of them columns, and that way I'm sure I'm putting the right field in the right place consistently. So let's go back and look at this again. So we have the same parameters listing each subject. Those haven't changed at all. We have the same filters where we assign the subject to the parameter, and that hasn't changed at all. But instead of having just a copy of the course titles, now we have two versions. And we're going to take this one and put it on rows, and this one and put it on columns. And that is much more in line with what I had in mind. So right now, this is telling me which courses most students take together. The darker the cell, the more students are taking those two courses. So if I hover, I'll see 48 students took college algebra and general biology 1 in the same semester. Now, this is great information, but this does not tell me how successful they were. So we had to go into a second iteration that looks a lot like this. All right, so instead of coloring the cells by the number of students taking the courses together, it is now colored using a calculation to show their success rate. So let's take a look at how that calculation is built. So what is this telling us? If the number of successful grades is greater than the number of unsuccessful grades, then students who take these courses together have a good chance of being successful, and so on and so forth. And what this allowed me to do by building it out this way was not only to assign colors based on the success rate, but also to include this verbiage in the tooltip so that when people are reading it, they are understanding at a very clear, in plain English, what they're seeing. So the successful and unsuccessful fields here are actually other calculations. So let's take a look at one of those. All right, so this is simply adding together all of your passing grades from your course that you've selected in columns to the course that you've selected in rows. So it's adding all those grades together. And then the unsuccessful field does the same thing with failing grades. But these, again, are also calculations. So let's take a look at what those look like. So because letter grades are a string dimension, we have to assign them a numeric value in order to sum them together. So this is just a calculation that assigns the failing grades a 1 and all other grades a 0, and this allows us to sum those together. All right, so at this point, we went ahead and added in some filters for course level, classification, and major per our provost request. And now we have a plethora of information. When we hover over the cell, we know 48 students took college algebra and general biology 1 in the same semester. They were generally successful. Great. Now, we could probably have stopped there, but I thought it could be better. So we went on to create this dashboard. Looks just the same, right? Except this was created in Tableau 10.5. And as you know, in 10.5, we have Viz and Tooltip. So now when you hover over, you can see grade distribution for the courses. Across the top, we have our columns. Down at the bottom, we have our rows, and then we have a crosstab in the middle. But you see the problem there is it disappears before you can really digest all of that information. So we thought Viz and Tooltip is cool, but maybe we should just build it out on the dashboard. So now when we click on a cell, we can see, again, that distribution over to the side. And in addition to just showing the grade distribution, now I've also added a color element showing if the student was retained or not retained. So what are we looking at here? We know that most students who took college algebra and general biology 1 were successful. However, the ones who were not successful, as you can see, are less likely to be retained. So we are planning that the advisors can use this when they're advising their students, and that the tutoring lab can use this when they're tutoring students, and they can kind of get a better idea of what kind of courses need that extra help and information. So currently, this is the final product, but I still have plans for how it's going to be even better in the future. I want to be able to add some additional information about those students who were not retained, try to figure out why perhaps they weren't retained. Some of them probably graduated. We know that, but we want to be able to say for sure. These graduated, these dropped out. And then I also want to add in some information about their average GPAs, the number of earned credit hours, and their credit ratios, how many of their attempted courses are they finishing and passing. I also want to add in some drill down to student row level data so that those advisors who need to do a deep dive can actually get down to that information using this dashboard. So lots of plans for the future. All right, so we just looked at our Tableau demo, and now we're going to look at one last example. So as Becky mentioned earlier, we did build a digital escape room. This came about because of a presentation I saw at last year's Tableau conference. I went to a presentation by Michael Lee from Humboldt University, and he was talking about how they use games to teach technology skills. So when Solitaire was invented, it was to teach people how to use a mouse. And when Minesweeper was invented, it was to teach people the difference between the 2 buttons on the mouse. And I thought, how great would it be if we had a dashboard to teach people how to use a Tableau dashboard? So we made this digital escape room that we then launched at our advancement, not a retreat. And the whole idea was that you have to go through all of these questions and you use the filters, you use the tooltips, you use parameters to dig into the data and to find the answers to the questions. If you answer all of them right, of course you escape. So how do you build this? It's really actually very easy. So all I did was I built out some basic dashboards using data that we already had at the institution about our students. And then I looked at those and I was like, well, what questions can this answer? So I developed several questions for each one. And then I used a parameter to give you a set of answer choices. And you go through and select your answers. And then I used an if-then calculation to determine if you got the answers correct or not. I also added in some hints at the corner of each of the pages on the dashboard, so you can hover over and get some information if you wanted to, if you were kind of stumped on something. So this is actually available on our Tableau public website if you want to go and give it a try and see if you've got what it takes to escape. So we have about 15 minutes left. We thought we'd go ahead and take some questions before we wrap up the session. So if anybody has questions.
Yes.
Incredible stuff, and it's very inspiring, and I can't wait to check out your Tableau public page.
Thank you.
One of our biggest, probably lots of people's biggest challenges, you've built something dazzling, everybody's like, wow, that's amazing. How do you get people to actually use it?
Wow.
That's a great question. And one of the ways that we do get people to use it is by encouraging training, by making sure that they know how to use it. We actually have a series of forums where we bring folks together. We do brown bag lunches. We showcase it. We encourage them to discuss it in group forums. But you're right. I mean, just pushing out the data without encouraging use is not really helpful. But we do a great deal of training, which I think helps tremendously, and then offer opportunities for the campus community to get together, to come together as a group and talk. And we include students in those discussions as well, so with faculty, staff, students. And oftentimes, whenever we have them reflect in a more public manner, we find that it encourages the use.
Somewhat related to that, how many users do you have, and what groups within the university are they from? Is it primarily administration? You mentioned the majors, changes in majors. Do you actually publish that to department heads and faculty to look at?
So the way we're set up right now is we're using Tableau desktop, not Tableau server. So anything that can be public facing is put on our Tableau public site. Anything that cannot be is actually put into our assessment management system and Event of Improve, which is password protected. So department chairs, administrators can access that information, and then they have to use Tableau Reader in order to read. So. How many? We have maybe 25 to 30 department chairs, and then a handful of upper administration.
Yeah. I would say roughly anywhere, probably close to 50 overall.
No more than 50.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How many people in your office develop the dashboards? Is it just you?
Currently, Jenny is our main individual. There are 3 other folks in the office, one of which I would say is next to Jenny, not quite approximating her, but is learning, and then we're trying to encourage other use. But the other research associate does use Tableau as well, and then our statistical analyst is using Vera. And so oftentimes, Zhejian and Jenny will partner on projects, and then Laura and I are kind of more so dabbling. I tend to use Tableau more so for compiling data to use in other statistical packages, so not for the dashboard creation. Like Jenny is definitely our dashboard creator, and I see us having another person to be able to support that.
Great work.
Thank you.
Yep. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
I see that you did the recruitment part to see like where your students come from. Did you think about either like expanding your alumni page to see where your students actually land from a corporate perspective?
Yes, that's a wonderful question. And actually, we have done a series of like infographics with that. They haven't made their way into dashboards quite yet, but that is something, I mean, our request, and as we get folks that are just eating up these dashboards, the demand is quickly becoming much greater than what Jenny is able to do on her own. So hence us trying to expand the skills and abilities within our office. And she's a terrific person who can like sit you down and kind of train you to learn it. We've gotten some other resources because we don't want to tie her up training folks. But yes, that would be a wonderful, we do a lot of work with the clearinghouse and looking to see where they're going, but we haven't built it out into a dashboard yet. Great question.
It's a follow-up question.
Yeah.
Okay, I know we have like a lot of higher ed people in the room. Is anyone starting to incorporate Tableau into their learning curriculum for these collegiate students?
We actually do teach it at the master's level in one course in our management information systems major. And I was really lucky to get to go and speak to that class back in September and talk to them about taking Tableau certification exam. And, but as far as I know, that is the only class. And my goal in the coming years would be to try and start a Tableau user group for students on our campus. We talked about a data fellows kind of program, so it's something we definitely want to incorporate more. It needs to be incorporated more.
Yes.
Let me know when you do, because we're planning on joining you.
Okay, perfect. Yes. Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Yes, we actually have tremendous support from our upper administration to move that route. And so, yes, I will. We will, definitely.
Oh, she's
When we start up the user group.
other colleges in the
colleges.
area, yeah.
I have two questions. One is the dashboards are amazing, but do you have any practice about, this is all about the student side, and do you have any practice or demo about the HR or finance part? That's a big part of university as well. The second question is, how do you facing those challenge of the back data change or the mismatch of the numbers from different systems? I know one university not just use the Tableau only, use other reporting portal or something. The numbers not match or the system is not match. How do you deal with that? Thank you.
Well, for question one, as far as reporting HR data in a dashboard, we do have a couple pages in our fact book that are faculty and staff pages that have that kind of level of data, but so far that's the only HR-related dashboard we've been asked to build out. Finance, that I haven't gotten. The finance group, I don't work with them much. You probably work with them more than I do. They haven't come to us with any sort of requests of that nature yet. And as far as the numbers not matching up, I mean, that is a daily challenge. Generally, if the numbers aren't matching, it's not necessarily because there is anything incorrect about it, but it's a difference in how we're defining the cohort or how we are, the timing that we're pulling the information. And what we do to work around that is we're just very transparent about this is when this is pulled and this is what it is referring to and this is how this is defined. I know we've been moving to a student data mart instead of a flat file, frozen file system. And in that transition, we had to figure out exactly how to rebuild our old reports, and we had to figure out exactly which fields we're going to use because they weren't matching up with the flat files. And it took probably about a good year of just exploring the data, finding out how to make it match the numbers. And we had a year of overlap in fall 2015 where we had the frozen file and the new data mart file, so we could make those comparisons until we came up with an SOP for exactly how we pull this and when we pull this and what it applies to.
And I would say on that aspect, we do a lot of quality control checking. It is like Jenny may work with the dashboard component, but in our office, it's all hands on deck checking numbers and trying to reconcile any discrepancies. Because that can be a tremendous problem. Certainly being part of a system, we've been very fortunate, and I would say throughout the years our data have gotten much cleaner, and those issues, we don't have as many issues with numbers not matching as we used to.
We might have time for one more,
and then we'll
wrap up.
Real quick question on training. You said it's really important to train people. So what kind of training do you provide? Do you provide web-based, let the user go through them, and then do in-house training? And what do you train, like staff members or?
That's a great question, and we have several different methods. So we actually, Becky had me build out a Tableau guide for our office colleagues to help them learn how to use Tableau, because as we all know, there are many, many, many Tableau learning options on their website, and they are phenomenal, but they're not necessarily higher ed focused. And so in order to onboard our new employees, we wanted to make a guide that was definitely higher ed focused. So spent a few months just coming up with different use cases that are common and writing out very straightforward instructions on how to do that. And so we start with that guide, and then we just work together on more advanced projects after that. And that's what we do for our staff internally in our office. And then when it comes time to train like faculty and staff outside of our office who are going to be the end users, sometimes we'll have like a workshop sort of sit down, go through it for an hour, ask questions, one-on-one time. That tends to work best for us. I haven't done any sort of web-based. We are working on a series of training videos that would just be very high-level, basic information for our end users, but they're still kind of in the project phase.
Thank you.
do we have time for one more?
Yeah, I think
Okay, we have time for
one more.
Just curious if you have any like resources or anything that you've done that's creative for displaying text for surveys, because we have a lot of text and we never know how best to display that in Tableau.
That is very true. And the only report that I have used survey text in Tableau is on the course evaluation report, and it's really just a very straightforward row for row. I know I've built word clouds in Tableau before, but without some sort of way to filter or use sentiment analysis on that, I feel like yes, it can be useful. You can see some of the more reoccurring, but you don't necessarily know if it's reoccurring in a good way or a bad way. So text analysis in Tableau is something I would love to do more of, but I feel like I probably need a different skill set in sentiment analysis to make that happen. So it's not really been a priority. But we'll just wrap up real quick then, because I know you've got other sessions to get to. And we're just going to recap some of the lessons we learned along the way in hopes that you can learn from our mistakes and not make the same ones yourselves. So we all know dirty data in is dirty data out. And this was really evident when we were building our alumni dashboard with the misspellings, and we just have to be aware of that up front so that we can make those changes and not report out things that are going to bite us in the end. We also learned to plan ahead and ask for feedback, especially when we were building out our longitudinal survey dashboard. If we had planned ahead more, we probably would have had our question matrix in place. We would have had our demographic filters in place. Instead, those are going to have to wait for our next 5-year version. And by asking for feedback from others on that report, we got great ideas for how to improve it and include additional pages, additional information that people were wanting. We also have to remember that our audience has very different levels of data savviness, and we have to recognize their limitations and include, additional information, whether it's in captions or tooltips or legends and labels. We just have to make it very clear to them, this is what you're seeing, this is what we're talking about, this is what you need to know. And by keeping it simple, we can do that. And by including all of that additional information, it keeps everybody on the same page together. But at the same time, we want to make it fun, because the more fun they have, the more they interact with the dashboards, and the more they are able to find that data for themselves. And as they come to know how empowering that is, they're going to want more dashboards.
And they do.
And they do. So be prepared when they start asking for more, that it's going to change your workload, and you have to be prepared to deliver. So we really appreciate you coming today. We'd love it if you would follow us on Twitter. I have my own page. We have an institutional research page. We're both available by email as well, and we'd love to collaborate, reach out, talk to you more about what you're doing and what you thought. And don't forget to fill out your session survey.